That's right. Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay. So we'll call to order the Monday, November 5th, 2018 Citizen Involvement Committee meeting. We can just probably make this easy and have people tell you who's here.
I have it already marked, but...
Roy Harris, Hillendale.
Okay.
Linda Basing, Okanema.
Karen Moy, Rivercrest.
Janice Morris, Berkeley Hills.
Mike Mitchell, Caulfield.
Dennis Anderson. Kanema.
Okay, so at the moment we're out without a quorum, but we will go ahead and do the presentations, and I'll apologize to our two presenters for the small turnout. I don't know whether it's pre-election excitement or what is it? Too loud?
There you go.
Okay, all right. So our first presentation is the Eve Nylanders of TriNet.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I work in the Office of Planning and Policy Development at TriMet, and I work with the jurisdictions within Clackamas County and also in East Multnomah County. That's I'm sort of the liaison to those areas, and I'm gonna try and take a slight. Excuse me, I keep coughing, but. So thank you, Christina, for inviting me here. And I'm going to try to give a brief presentation highlighting a couple of things, if I can get this to work now. It's
Nothing else.
It's not scrolling now. So let me
Of
see.
course it isn't. Hold on.
This seems to be a common occurrence.
Okay.
There's a gremlin.
It's funny. It was working when I tested it a moment ago.
Try it. Oh. Try it now.
Okay, so I want to take a slightly different approach, and I'm going to talk a little bit about transit concepts first, and then I'm going to get into, before we talk about TriMet service in Clackamas County and in Oregon City, I want to set the scene that way. And then I want to talk a little bit about HB 2017, which is the new legislation that has changed the landscape for public transportation funding. Then I'll talk about some initiatives across TriMet, and then specifically talk about transit in Oregon City and what's on the horizon. So I'd like to just ask your patience with me. I'm trying to take a slightly different approach by talking about transit concepts in general. I just thought it would be a useful place for us to start, to talk about how a transit network starts and how maybe when you work for a transit agency, how we talk about transit and how we think about transit. So some of this is quite shamelessly stolen from Jared Walker and Associates, his consulting firm, which advises they're based in Portland, but they advise transit agencies worldwide, because I like how they set things out. So the concepts I want to start with are access and frequency. So access is simply, where can I get to in a reasonable amount of time? And access is what arises from a connected network. And so the network is what makes transit valuable to people. And frequency, a network with frequent buses is what makes, or frequent vehicles is what makes transit most useful to people. And people will ride when there's greater frequency. Frequency is a backstop to reliability. So if a vehicle breaks down or is late, then it means another vehicle will be along sooner as well. It reduces waiting, and it makes connections much more feasible. And so once you invest in higher frequency as a transit agency, that allows people to take advantage of the whole network. And so this moves along beyond thinking about the line that goes in front of my house as being my line, or the line that goes near my workplace as mine. In a network, what's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. It's about the power of the network. So I put together a couple of examples using Oregon City to show what a transit network, how the power of the network really works. And so this is a visualization of how far a person can travel if they're using just the line 33. And this is based, they're somewhere down in downtown Oregon City, in the lower town. And this is how far they could travel. The first part in white is within 15 minutes, and then it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes. So this little lady on the map, she can reach within an hour about 57,000 jobs. So that's where she can get to at 7 a.m. on a weekday. And if you would add in the entire network, though, it might not look that much different, but here you can see that when other lines are available to her, she can make it to downtown Portland within an hour. She can make it to a lot of Southeast Portland, Milwaukee much more easily. And so within that same amount of time, about 150,000 jobs are within her reach. And the one thing I was hesitant to use this example here because Oregon City is at the edge of our transit service district. So it, say, doesn't have the same profound effect as, say, someone centered elsewhere, where these connections are really a lot more visible. But even so, I thought it was a useful, sort of useful illustration. I did something similar, putting her elsewhere on the line 33, so you can see how that changes it as well. Somebody who's in the Portland-Milwaukee border area, she can go from reaching about 57,000 jobs within an hour to reaching about 250,000 jobs. So that's just a little bit of an indication of how that network matters. And when you have more frequent buses, it allows people to access a much larger range of destinations. So moving on, the other set of concepts I wanted to introduce are ridership and coverage. And these are basically competing goals, and this is one of the reasons why people fight about, they have disagreements about transit service. So it's important to understand why you're disagreeing. So ridership is, when you think about ridership, that's the business approach. This is when you're looking at efficient, frequent service. That's what you want to provide. You provide it in fewer locations, but you serve a larger number of people. When you're talking about coverage, here you're talking about some for everyone. So everyone gets some access, but the frequency of the service that they get is not as much. So it's more like lifeline service, lifeline access. So the important thing to keep in mind is that they are both legitimate goals. And most transit agencies represent a mix of these two, so they're not purely one or the other. But it's simply important to recognize that what goal you're trying to achieve, and also to recognize that these goals are in conflict with one another. So if you are trying to keep, say, within a certain budget, you can't increase both frequency and coverage. There is an inherent trade-off between the two. So it's just something to keep in mind, because it helps our conversations with each other when we talk about transit and what our goals are for it. So that's just a little bit of a backdrop. Now I'm going to move into TriMet's service enhancement plans. So I think at least the people who were here first might have gotten a copy of the Southeast Service Enhancement Plan. I think maybe everybody did. So that's just for your reference. So a couple of years ago, from around 2011 to 2016, TriMet worked with communities across our service district, which extends from basically Forest Grove to Troutdale, and then from the river, from the Columbia down to Oregon City. And so we worked with riders, we worked with neighborhood associations, employers, large institutions, social service providers, and the jurisdictions, of course, to find out what people's priorities were for service in the future. And so this became our blueprint for the next 20 years. While it's not an adopted plan, what it is it's a guiding vision for, say, 20 years of improvements in bus service. And so this has been what we've been using to guide the process of the service changes we've made. in the past few years. And so that's a map that you'll also find in more detail in the service enhancement plan for Southeast. And this was what we put together after a lot of extensive outreach. And so that's the framework under which we were working for the past, say, 5 years or so. And what's changed things right now is House Bill 2017, which is Keep Oregon Moving Act. So this is the bill that was passed in 2017, which created a new dedicated source of funding for public transportation across the state. And this went into effect in 2018 when there was a new payroll tax that was put into place. And so this is something that's statewide. And in TriMet's case, we anticipate that this will generate about $49 million annually. And so when this was being developed, we put together an external committee that would help us make decisions on how these new funds should be spent. And so the members of this advisory committee come from the organizations that are on that slide that you can see, representing the jurisdictions, representing riders, and representing other members of the community as well. And so as a result of this, and these were some of the requirements, there were a lot of stipulations attached to the legislation that service be focused on areas of where there were low-income populations, that we would explore non-diesel bus options, mostly electric buses, and that we would put into place a low-income fare. And there were some other requirements in terms of funding school transportation and funding transportation for elderly and disabled riders, and also for looking outside of the district to facilitate connections between TriMet or between transportation service districts, transit service districts. And so there's a lot going on in the slide, and I'm not going to get into everything. But this was what emerged as a result of the committee's meeting. These were how, given those stipulations and given what the various communities involved said, this is what emerged as our plan for the first couple of fiscal years of HB 2017 funding. So the largest share will go towards expanding service. And so this involves purchasing new buses, because if you need to provide more service, you need more buses, and so on. So as I mentioned earlier, there will be more frequency on certain lines, more coverage, so there will be some new lines created, and I'll show a map in a second that displays geographically how this will look. And so, and a big portion of this is going to also fund low-income fare, which just began this summer in July. A portion will go towards introducing electric buses. And I'll get to the regional coordination piece in yellow in a moment. So the pie on the left is ongoing funding, and the triangle on the right is one-time only funding. So some of those funds will go towards providing transit priority to help buses move through traffic more quickly, and improving conditions at stops and at transit stations, which is something we heard as a priority. And so this is the plan that emerged for funding for the next, say, 4.5-5 fiscal years. As you can see in blue, those are new lines. Those in red are service upgrades. And we're going to be adding new bus lines across the region, expanding weekend service. We've reintroduced, and some of this has already taken place, I should add. So for instance, there are 2 bus lines that have 24-hour service right now. And we're also looking at increasing frequency and having earlier or later service for a number of bus lines. And so some of these changes this is our best proposal. Some of these that have not yet taken place still might change in the future. So depending on how the funds come in and what, whether there are any changes in terms of what are the top needs. So I mentioned before the piece about regional coordination. What this is a source of funding for shuttles. So there are places in the service district that are not best served by a fixed route bus network. It's not cost effective for TriMet to provide bus service there, but we know that there are strong needs in these communities, say for community shuttles or for employment shuttles. So $3 million has been set aside for these shuttles. And some, I know in some in the list of approved shuttle or those that have been, that applied and were accepted for funding, one is for a route in Oregon City, to be determined. And I'm not sure if that was the Oregon City that applied for it or if that was Clackamas County.
In conjunction with Clackamas County.
Okay, yeah. And so, and also between Clackamas Town Center and Clackamas Community College. But there are others that might be relevant too. So I think, and that's also, there are also some opportunities for building relationships outside of the service district too. So that's a little bit of background about HB 2017. There are a couple of other things I wanted to mention too. This is also tied to HB 2017. But as I mentioned, TriMet started a low-income fair this summer. And so far, it started in July, and about 6,000 people have signed up so far. So it's clearly of great importance to people in the community. And in order to be eligible, people have to earn less than 200% of the federal poverty level. And when they register, they sign up and show their eligibility, their tickets are half the cost of an adult fare, and the benefits are even greater if you look at the monthly pass cost. And so that's one thing that has been an important piece of this legislation, which is already in place. The other thing I wanted to mention, do we have TriMet riders? Has anybody, do you have a hop card? Okay, so you're familiar with it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so this was something that we started in summer of 2017. So these are these tap cards that you can use instead of a paper ticket. And when you board the bus, you will tap it on the front, or if you board the MAX, you can do so before you get on. And there are some nice benefits to these too for riders, because once you've tapped twice in a day, you don't have to pay anything more. So in the past, if you paid ticket by ticket and you didn't have a day pass, you could end up paying more. And so this was something that disadvantaged people who say couldn't afford the cost of a monthly pass up front. They might pay more over the course of a month for fare than somebody whose pass was subsidized by an employer or who could afford that. And so now if you tap, as soon as you've tapped twice in a day, you've earned a daily ticket. And if you tap the equivalent amount of times as you would for a monthly pass, you've earned it. So this is called fare capping, and it means that you don't end up paying more than somebody who has, say, paid a monthly pass. So I like to think of it as a built-in equity measure, and not too many places have adopted this yet. I know a couple of locations around the world do, but that's a neat feature of it too. And now I'd like to get to some of the changes that are coming to Oregon City. In March is when we roll out some of our changes for our fiscal year 2019 plans. And so at this point, we're going to be starting a new bus line called the 31 along Thiessen and Webster, and this will run between Oregon City and Clackamas Town Center. At the same time, we're also going to be making changes to line 79, and it'll have a more streamlined route. And the new Webster line, the 31, will take over some of the existing line 79 route. And we know that a lot of people actually do ride between both locations. So the way we're writing our schedule is so that the buses will be staggered about 15 minutes. So that right now I think it's a bus that runs every 30 minutes. So, but now if you say leave Oregon City, you could catch either bus if you were going all the way to Clackamas Town Center in roughly about 15 minutes. So that's one thing that's coming up in just a couple months. And we're also adding Sunday service on a couple of lines in the next fiscal year. So this is fall of 19 into spring of 2020. The Estacada line might not be useful for Oregon City riders, but I mention it just because it's not too far away. And also we're going to be adding Sunday service on the line 32. And some of the other changes that are coming down the pike a little bit further based on the new HB 2017 plan is to extend line 32 to Oregon City High School, add midday service on line 99. And so there's not right now at this point a timetable attached to these changes, but I just want to mention that too. And I think I provided the link to that longer document in case you're interested. So that is it for me. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
How do you get 200% of the federal poverty level?
That was a process. Basically, the legislation did not define low income and what low income areas were. So there are two things. So they didn't define how low income should be defined. It was up to each transit agency and the advisory committee we worked with to determine that. And so that was what that committee came up with. And the same way I know there was a process by which, so if you look at this map, you see the areas that are in gray. Those are census blocks that are considered to be have high equity needs. And this does not simply reflect low income. It's a combination of about 10 different factors. And that's something that TriMet has an equity index that we use. And so that's what this is based on. That was, again, also the work of the advisory committee to decide what qualified as a low-income area or an area of high need.
And so over here, you got, all these additions and improvements and stuff, but I would think you'd had to give up something to do this.
Well, this is because there's it's a new dedicated transit funding source in the legislation that we've been funded as an agency by fares, also by a tax on employers. This is a tax that's a tax on employees, so it's 0.1%, and it's a payroll tax.
So now they don't have a payroll tax for TriMet, the employers don't?
They didn't until this legislation was passed in 2017.
And that's like $60 million, how many, $60 million that brings in or something, did you say?
I think about 49 million.
49 million.
And it's estimates.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But there are times if we're in a recession, then we have to have the difficult conversations about what service to cut. So we've been there as an agency in the past, and those are always difficult conversations to have. It's a lot easier to talk about service that you're adding. So
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
How many electric buses do you have or proposing?
Right now, we have a couple that we've ordered and we're waiting to get in. So it's a process.
Where do you plan on running those?
Right now, I'm not certain I can get back to the committee on this. Line 62, I think, is where we are testing. We're going to be testing 5 electric buses. We ordered it, we tested it, one of the buses, and there are problems with it, so we're waiting.
Where's line 62?
On the west side, we're doing it on a fairly short line. But I will check. I know it's one of the 60s, but I'm not entirely certain. So,
Okay, thank you.
but no, it's one of those things. It takes a while to order and
My
actually
husband works
get
with
the
electric
buses.
vehicles, that's
Yeah.
why I.
So, I'm sorry?
My husband works with electric trucks, and
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
he's going to ask me questions.
Oh, nice. Well, I will find out more for you.
Thank you.
So that regional coordination piece that you mentioned, is that the same as the South Oregon City Community Jobs Connector?
Is that the one that's, hold on, let me grab the copy of the service enhancement plan.
Okay.
So I know when the SEPs, the service enhancement plans were developed, those were where we had heard there was a need for shuttles. But I'm not sure how it's evolved since from this point to there was an application process that was part of HB 2017. So there was a subcommittee that was formed to focus on regional coordination.
Okay.
And so I think the counties took the lead on the application process. So is that, I haven't been as involved in the community shuttle piece of things. Maybe you know a little bit more than
So
I
I
do.
do know the shuttle is one of the city's work plan, and John Lewis and Dana Webb and our Public Works Department can know more, so I can put that on my liaison list to kind of give an update on that and next steps for us.
And I'll find out what I can too.
Great.
So you're asking whether it's the job shuttle that was identified in the SCP is the one that's going to be put in place?
Yeah, one of your slides showed regional coordination
Yeah,
there.
right.
So is that referring to projects like this community? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not two different things, it's the
Right,
same?
it's the same thing.
Okay.
It's putting into place what was in the SCP.
Okay.
And so my understanding is those would be operated by third parties. So I know in some cases, Ride Connection operates some shuttles, so they're not TriMet operated.
So they'd be TriMet funded, but operated by another agency?
They'd be funded by HB 2017 monies. I'm not sure if they'd be considered TriMet monies or not. That might be a technicality, but.
Yeah, okay. But HB 2017?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, presentation number 2, Downtown Oregon City Association update. Jonathan Stone.
Come on.
Good evening. The speakers out there are kind of like hot, like they're cutting out. It's kind of weird.
Crackly.
So my name is Jonathan Stone. I'm the executive director of the Downtown Oregon City Association. And Christina invited me to come probably several months ago, and I said I can't. And so, but then she finally pinned me down for today. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Part of the reason I said I couldn't come and talk to you guys a few months ago is because I didn't know what I would say. We were in the middle of updating our strategic plan and trying to figure out what the future looks like for downtown and our organization. So, excuse me. So anyways, thank you all for your support of our Great American Main Street. I have not sat in front of you since we won that award, so that is a huge feather in the cap for Oregon City, and a huge honor for the work that's been accomplished down there. And definitely, we're not done. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more catalytic projects underway. There's more work we can do to support our businesses and to make downtown Oregon City the best it possibly can be as sort of the heart of our community. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, we're in the middle of updating our strategic plan and identifying goals that DOCA can achieve over the next 1 to 5 years and establishing a vision for what our downtown might look like then. And that's resulted in a complete revamp of our mission and our vision statements. If you've read our mission or vision statement before, more power to you. That is a journey that not many people have gone down. Nevertheless, the board voted at our last board meeting to cut our mission statement in less than half. We're down to 10 words. That's a pretty impressive accomplishment on our part. So our new vision statement is DOCA cultivates commerce and community in Oregon City's historic downtown. I hope you find that pretty clear and might have a better understanding what our organization does, because if you read our previous mission statement, you would be completely clueless. Nevertheless, that's what we've settled on. There's a lot that we consider in draft phase, and so I appreciate your input on some of the things that we've been talking about. So our new vision statement, which our previous vision statement was focused on the district itself, included lots of flowery language about this place with kids with balloons and ice cream cones. Those words weren't in there, but it might well have been. But our draft vision splits it apart now, not just for the district, but also for the organization. So we see a downtown that is welcoming to all, economically resilient, local and independent, cultural and vibrant, and embracing of its past and future. So that's for the district. And then for the organization itself, we see an organization that reflects the community it serves, is broadly supported and respected, and represents informed and engaged stakeholders. So those are draft words, and I certainly appreciate any feedback on that in terms of how it might guide the future of the work that we do for downtown. And I apologize, I have a couple of minutes that I wasn't ready to come up, so which is why my tongue is. Anyways, DOCA's role, just to be clear, is in the context of our new mission and vision statement, is to cultivate commerce, build community, manage what we call Oregon's hometown brand, advocate for projects and programs that benefit our downtown, partner with organizations that have shared priorities, and create great public spaces. So in the respect of the vision statement and the other statements, there's a couple of simplifications, but they introduce a few new concepts for our organization. One is on the emphasis of community and commerce. And a little bit of a less of an emphasis, to Christina's horror maybe, on historic preservation. But I should say that historic preservation is supported by community and commerce, and that we believe that historic places are strong places. So Main Street organizations, of which we are, so no matter what our mission or vision statement says, we are accredited by the National National Main Street Center, which is a subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, is essentially economic revitalization through historic preservation, always at the core. But how do we get there? And that is by cultivating community and commerce. Does that make sense? So for us moving forward in our simplified format, there's 3 pillars. Building of our organization in terms of making it efficient and strong, the community and commerce. So what does that look like in the coming year? For our organization, you may not be aware, the Economic Improvement District, which funded us probably for the better part of 7 years, 7 or 8 years, we ultimately sunsetted this April. And that represents a huge part of our budget as an organization, and to how do we adapt to that new funding reality and sustain our operations while also growing our organizational diversity. When we think about building community and cultivating commerce, we think about celebrating our successes, getting the community engaged in our work, and for 2019, creating a vision for the future of the courthouse. If you're not aware, the courthouse is leaving. In the planning horizon that they say that the courthouse is going to go, we need a vision for its future yesterday, is basically how it comes down. If the goal is to, the day that the courthouse employees pack up their desks and move up the hill, the next day they begin construction on its adaptive reuse. If that's what we want, which I think we should, we need to be on top of that as in terms of what that vision looks like. Because especially if its future looks anything like a public-private partnership, those are wheels that turn slowly to identify funding and a strategy. For cultivating commerce, we see, ultimately we want a strong business mix, but that in the near term, we're going to focus on strengthening our retail. We want improved downtown connectivity. We are literally downtown and separated from everything else by a bluff, a river, a railroad, and highways. And how do we make sure that people can come to our district, but that also Oregon City residents feel welcome and that they're able to come there? We want at least one housing project confirmed and to work more closely with building our business community and business networks. So over the next 5 years, I guess I basically mentioned what it means over the next 5 years, but a couple other things that fit into the picture more broadly are greater participation from partners and organizations in making the future of downtown Oregon City great. So that means DOCA is not doing everything. That means that the Riverwalk will be integrated into downtown as part of the experience. And I guess that's all I have for that part. So I just wanted to kind of give you a flavor of where our minds are at as we're moving forward and see if there's any questions along the mission, vision, and those priorities. Do you have any suggestions for us as we move this from draft to final? And when I say final, I mean living document. But the more we can pin it down sooner than later is great. And then if there are any questions, I have a couple other updates about some upcoming things. I will pause there for a moment.
I think it's a huge improvement. It's, not just less words, but the ones that are left are meaningful. So you actually can tell now what the organization is supposed to be doing. So I think it's a great, I sat and stared at it for a while and tried to come up with suggestions and really didn't have any. So I think it really gets it to the essence.
While he was in China, so.
Yeah, but there were pugs and what else? There were goats, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the one point where I thought my board might faint, I inserted a video of fainting goats. So.
Can never have too many fainting goats.
Got a couple questions here. First of all, you read all that off very quickly. Where can I find those statements online? Are they available somewhere?
Good point. So we're in the draft phase. I was planning on sending out an email to our stakeholders in the coming days. And this came sooner than I could get to doing that. But what I can commit to doing is doing some sort of blog post on our website and an announcement. So if you watch downtownoregoncity.org, probably I think it's /news or something like that, but there's a link for
Hey,
news.
Jonathan, if you send it to me, I will forward it to this group.
Great. So Christina will send you the link. So I can commit to doing that, and we are certainly open to feedback on those.
Okay. The second question I had, when you was looking at the future in commerce and community, you mentioned the housing development.
Sure. Well, there are a number of interests in developing housing in downtown Oregon City. There's one project that is currently under agreement at the corner of 10th and Main. And so when DOCA looks at its 2019 priorities, we want to do everything we can to help the developer in the city and any parties that are involved to make sure that that project and or another project are confirmed in 2019.
Okay, so there's nothing firmed up yet, though, but you're looking.
Well, it's firmed up in the sense that it's under agreement, but they're still waiting on some barriers such as a quiet zone and a couple of other technicalities that can be mitigated, that the city's actually in the process of trying to mitigate, but until it can be confirmed as a housing development.
That's all. Thanks.
When you say quiet zone, are you talking about the train? Mm-hmm. Would that just be in that area, or would that be all of Oregon City that the train runs through? Because
I'm pretty sure it's for the 3 major intersections, or that there's a few crossings essentially from 10th Street to the train station. I don't think the quiet zone addresses other lengths of the track, but those are where the train normally blows its horn in Oregon City.
I live in Geneva, and I can tell you it blows its horn there. Even though we have no crosswalks or anything that crosses the tracks, they do.
I'm happy to provide an update of the length of the quiet zone.
That would be excellent, yeah.
Jonathan, what kind of a vacancy rate do we have right now down there as far as office and retail? Because when I go by there, it looks pretty full, but I don't know what's going on upstairs there and stuff, so.
Sure. Our upper story uses are the most fluid, but they also, as far as I can tell, tend to fill up the quickest in terms of a lawyer leaves, another lawyer moves in. So in general, we haven't focused our programmatic efforts on the upper stories because, like a lot of downtowns that are revitalizing upper stories are problematic because they're largely vacant. Because we have the courthouse and some of the other office needs, we don't have that as much of a problem. In terms of our first floor vacancies, we tend to hover around less than 10%. It just depends on the day. Some of the spaces that are left over tend to be kind of in a gray area as to whether it's vacant or not, or whether it's actually leasable or not, in terms of what a retailer might want. And so when we say we're looking at focusing on retail in 2019, the intent is to focus on right-sized retail-ready spaces so that we can invite more active storefront uses into the district.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I have a curious question, and maybe you've addressed it in the your board. How do you advance or create parking availability downtown? If you increase the retail, if you increase the population down there, there's a dire need for people to find a place to park, and I wonder what kind of what kind of discussions has been put in place on terms of like advancing that?
Sure. A couple of things. A parking problem is a good problem. That means that something's working. And when I started here 5 years ago, we didn't really have a parking problem in the evening, and now we do. So that means that people are coming to downtown Oregon City a lot more frequently than they used to. In fact, if Christina can correct me if I'm wrong, the parking study that was done in 2009 identified peak parking times, I think if I recall, it's like 2 p.m. or something during the weekday, which you could probably attribute to court traffic. Then now, actually, some of our peak times aren't in the workday in downtown. And so something's worked, and people are coming to downtown Oregon City way more frequently to patronize businesses that weren't there back then. That being said, we have to be continually responsive to the changing needs of the districts. And one of the ways of doing that is through enforcement, which the city's done really well. In 2009, if I recall, there wasn't a lot of the strength of enforcement in downtown wasn't that great, and we managed to essentially accommodate more vehicle trips in the district while also having similar utilization rates of the parking. So that it comes through effective management. At some point, management can only go so far, and then you have to look at capacity increases. One of the things that I believe is currently going through the Planning Commission, maybe has made it to the City Commission, is the code updates, the zoning code updates that are in process, which will, at least when I last saw them, will allow us to have nights and weekends parking on private lots in downtown. And there's some details there that have to be worked out. But so as kind of a management and kind of a capacity thing, that if we can work with private lot owners to sign those lots uniformly so that people know that they're able to park there without having at risk of being towed in sort of partnership with the city or our organization, that opens up many more parking spaces for our peak times than may not have otherwise been available. That's one solution, and then Christina's got a whole bunch more.
I'll wait till my liaison update.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have a few updates that I would like to share that are less strategic and looking to the future. I meant to grab one on my walk up here, but we're selling miniature elevators. If you haven't seen them,
They're very cool.
they're going like hotcakes. And so limited quantity, they're available on our website, downtownoregoncity.org/swag. Apparently people love the elevator. I mean, that's no surprise, right? There's a wine walk coming up on Thursday. If you're wanting to get a ticket, I'm sorry, they're sold out. So all 500 tickets that we had available have sold. We do need volunteers. So if you know anybody that wanted to participate in the wine walk but didn't get a chance to get a ticket, if you volunteer, we'll give you a free elevator ornament. And then on Small Business Saturday, we will be launching what's called a Downtown Oregon City gift card program, which essentially are plastic cards that work just like credit cards, but only at participating downtown businesses. And those can be purchased through our website at the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center and in our office. So those sales will begin either the 20th or the 24th, but definitely Small Business Saturday, which is the 24th. So if you know anybody that's looking to give the gift of downtown Oregon City, that's a unique way to do that. So those are my few updates in terms of upcoming events. Other than the wine walk, of course, the tree lighting on December 1st, just the same way we do it every year with Santa coming down in a fire truck and lighting the tree and the mayor and singing and all kinds of stuff.
Any other questions for Jonathan?
Not a question, just a comment. The car show was awesome that they had downtown.
This year, and a huge thanks to the Oregon City High School Band Boosters for the effort that they put into that. We were worried when the car club that we had partnered with before was unable to do it anymore, that we weren't going to be able to make that event happen, and the Band Boosters really showed up to make that possible.
Cool. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if you guys have any comments at all, we'll post some of that vision, mission stuff on our website. We appreciate the comments. I'm sure my board does as they work on finalizing that for what we're working on moving forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to assume there are no public comments since there's no one else here. So we'll move on to staff liaison update on questions from our last meeting.
Great. In your packet, you have the answers. Generally, they were, I attached both previous presentations, and like always, I'll attach the TriMet presentation to next month, and I'll send it out. For tonight, what I heard for questions for me to get back to is more information on the quiet zone and the length, including, does it include Kenema? When Jonathan sends me information about the revised mission and goals, I'll forward that onto the group. So don't worry about it, just send it to me, you're good.
All right. See you guys. Thank you.
As well as more information about that shuttle bus as part of the HB 2017. And in kind of response to Dennis's comment about parking, if you recall last year, the city adopted a transportation demand management plan, which is a fancy word of saying how do we make sure we utilize all the assets we have before we build new assets? And there's kind of a big work plan for the next 15 years for all stakeholders, both DOCA and the city and the neighborhood and others, on how to do that. And there's going to be an implementation committee created, kind of a working group to kind of all the stakeholders to go look at the work plan and start taking down the work plan items that need to happen. And that will start sometime in the new year. I don't know who's on the committee yet, but that group will be able to provide updates to the CIC about, I think what Jonathan said, one nice thing about some of the things we already are doing, we're already working ahead of time to take down some of the work plan items, which is like private property owners downtown, they may lease out their space during the day. And now when you drive downtown to go to a restaurant, that space is already leased out, but the person to use it doesn't use it at night. So how do you work with property owners to be able to kind of change their leases or be able to charge or not charge for parking in the evening? So once again, we can utilize all those assets we're using. Another example is we're learning that our peak time parking is later in the day. Do we have the right hours for our code enforcement for the time period you're paying your fees? Should it go farther into the evening and start later in the morning? Is it 10 to 7? Those are some of those questions that we can keep looking on to make sure that, as Rick Williams, the consultant, always says, everybody wants to park one block from the courthouse, but you don't have enough spaces. So how do you keep encouraging people to park farther away? So people that parked one block from the courthouse, how do we get them to park 3 blocks from the courthouse? The people who went 3 blocks from the courthouse, how do we get them to go 5 blocks from the courthouse? And then we can keep spreading out, because we don't necessarily have a parking problem in all of downtown, is what our newest update said. We have a really constrained parking issue in those kind of 1.5 blocks on either side of the courthouse. And we have whole other areas that aren't being utilized for on-street parking. So that's kind of how we have a group to work together to better utilize those assets. So I can give an update on that as well in the next meeting. Additionally, I received, and I'll send this in an email, updates on all of the postcards and which neighborhood association has spent how much money in this, starting since July 1st of this year. Some of you are on target to go past your allocation for the year, that we have enough money, I think, in the budget to meet it. But it is a question of, and I've heard in previous years, the neighborhoods that went past their allocation did ask other neighborhoods if they could utilize, the additional money. So I didn't know how it was done in the past, but I know there are a couple that may go past their kind of equation for the year based on number of residents times postcard equals this amount of money. So, and there was some carryover, so there's also potentially money in this budget cycle to look at additional opportunities for outreach, more than just postcards. So maybe some of the money for the static display in the library or other public facility could be used. So I'll provide an update of the current postcards as well.
Okay. Great, that's it?
That's all I have.
Okay. I'm going to make a suggestion. It's kind of hard to have a decent discussion with less than half of the group here. So if everybody's okay, I'm going to suggest that we just table discussion of the work plan for our next meeting. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, so we'll move on to the round table. Roy, you want to kick off?
Sure. Okay, we, Hillendale and Tower Vista, since Verd isn't here, we had our most recent general meeting on October 2nd. We had a majority of the candidates there. Mike was there, Brian was there. Didn't have very many attendees as we were still struggling to adapt to having to produce our own cards. So unfortunately, the mailers did not go out. But we did have a nice, very civil meeting, I think, between all the candidates. It was really, really good. Our next steering meeting is tomorrow night, and our next general meeting is scheduled for January 8th. And that's all we got.
Linda?
Dennis, well, go ahead, Lydia.
I can add that we're going to have our meeting, November 15th would be our next general meeting. That's all I have.
Okay. Karen?
Well, I had a strange realization when I got here tonight. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 15th. However, our secretary's been out of town a great deal. We didn't have a steering committee meeting. So I'm assuming our next meeting is November 15th. We'll see what happens. At this point, I'm not aware of anyone who was asking to appear. So,
You can always join Kenema.
yeah, we may go see Kanema since they came to see us.
Anything else? Nope. Jen?
We had a steering committee meeting last month, and we're going to have elections for all of the positions on next Tuesday.
Okay. Caulfield, our last meeting also was candidates and the school district bond presentation. Our next meeting is November 27th, and there may be an agenda, but I just got back in town and I don't know what it is. Christina?
As Jonathan was mentioning about our code updates, they were, the equitable housing code updates were initially adopted by the Planning Commission, but they have asked staff to come back at the end of November to adopt their findings, so it won't go to City Commission till after November. But if you want to learn more about the draft code, it's available online. If you go to the Planning Department under City Code Updates on the top right side, and you can read all the red line PDFs you've ever wanted because we have them all up there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Yeah, you can be real fast on that. Commissioner Shaw, anything to
Have
add?
a ring to it, doesn't it, Mike?
What?
Commissioner Shaw.
Careful.
Not jinxing.
2 years ago, well, the library's been open 2 years now. And a year ago, the library got the DeMuro Award for Historic Preservation. Kind of a rare opportunity for a city to get. But the Ermitinger House just got the DeMuro Award last 2 nights ago. So 2 years in a row, Oregon City has had the DeMuro Historic Preservation Award, so it's pretty cool. So
All right.
anyway, just a little food for thought for you there.
Great news. Great news. And thank you for being here. Anybody have anything else? We're adjourned.
Okay, so that would be a really good reason to